I was right. 4 under did win, but at the same time, I had to do it in a playoff.
For a time, Patrick Reed was not merely an American golfer. He was Captain America, the player who stared into hostile Ryder Cup crowds and seemed to become stronger when they turned against him. The finger to the lips, the clenched fist, the confrontation with Rory McIlroy. Every gesture made him look less like a golfer and more like a man defending national territory. Then came Augusta. In 2018, Reed held off Ricky Fowler to win the Masters by 1 stroke. The green jacket completed the image. Fearless competitor, major champion, built for pressure. Golf had found one of its most useful characters. A man audiences could admire, resent, or argue about but rarely ignore. Years later, another number appeared. $40,709,215. That is the amount one public earnings database calculates Reed collected through individual prizes, team payouts, and bonuses during 4 seasons with LIV Golf. It does not necessarily represent every contractual payment. It does not reveal the complete value of his original agreement, but it establishes the scale. More than $40 million earned inside the league he joined during professional golf's civil war. And then, one date, August 25, 2026. The day Reed was expected to become eligible to compete in PGA Tour events again as a non-member, provided he followed tour regulations. $40 million, one return date, and question golf had been trying to avoid since the sport fractured. What exactly happens when the players who left begin coming back? At first, Reed's announcement sounded personal. He said he wanted to return to the PGA Tour. He described himself as a traditionalist. He spoke about family, competition, and the atmosphere he missed. He said that during a tournament in Dubai, he watched other players leave the practice range for their tee times and felt the adrenaline building without him. He wanted that feeling again. His explanation was simple. The structure around it was not. LIV Golf issued its own statement. The league said it had been unable to reach terms with Reed on a potential contract extension. It thanked him for his contribution and presented the separation as part of a future in which players would eventually move more freely between tours. That sentence mattered, because Reed's departure was not described as an escape. It was described as a negotiation that did not close. That leaves a gap between the two public stories. Reed's version focused on what he wanted back. LIV's version focused on what could not be agreed. There is no public evidence proving that money alone caused the separation. Contract details remain private. The complete negotiating positions of both sides have not been disclosed. What remains is not a verdict. It is a timeline. And Patrick Reed has spent most of his career living inside timelines that refuse to disappear. Long before the green jacket, there were questions surrounding his college career. Published accounts included allegations of cheating and theft during his time at the University of Georgia. Reed denied those accusations. He acknowledged alcohol-related violations and produced statements from former coaches that his representatives said supported his denial. The accusations were never established by a court as proof that Reed cheated or stole, but they entered the public record. That distinction would become important because once suspicion attaches itself to an athlete, later events are rarely judged alone. Reed continued winning. He helped Augusta State capture national championships. He turned professional. He qualified for the PGA Tour. By the age of 23, he had become the youngest winner of a World Golf Championships event at that time. The performance data was difficult to dismiss. So was the confidence. Reed once said he considered himself one of the 5 best players in the world. To some, it sounded arrogant. To others, it sounded like the psychological armor required to survive at the highest level. Then the Ryder Cup transformed that armor into a product. Captain America was marketable because he was not neutral. He created conflict. Conflict created attention. Attention created value. Golf did not need everyone to like Patrick Reed. It needed everyone to watch him. That is the uncomfortable economics of sports celebrity. A universally admired athlete can sell trust. A polarizing athlete can sell engagement. Television networks receive a rivalry. Sponsors receive visibility. Tournaments receive a recognizable antagonist or hero depending on which side of the rope the audience occupies. Reed's reputation was never separate from the business. It became part of the inventory. In 2018, the inventory reached its highest value. He entered the final round of the Masters with a 3-shot lead over Rory McIlroy. By Sunday evening, Reed had survived charges from Jordan Spieth and Ricky Fowler and collected his first major championship. The public image should have stabilized there. Major champion, Ryder Cup icon, 9 future PGA Tour victories within reach. The story should have become easier. It did not. At the 2019 Hero World Challenge, television cameras showed Reed making practice swings in a sandy waste area behind his ball. Sand moved. The PGA Tour applied a 2-stroke penalty for improving his line of play. Reed said the camera angle did not reflect what he had seen from his position. He did not deny that the sand moved, but said the movement had not been intentional. The ruling was official. The interpretation of intent was not. That event changed the lens. From that moment, every close ruling involving Reed carried the weight of the previous one. In 2021, at the Farmers Insurance Open, Reed lifted his ball to determine whether it was embedded before a rules official arrived. Video later showed the ball had bounced before settling in the rough. Criticism returned immediately. Yet the PGA Tour's rules officials called his procedure textbook. The USGA explained that the rules allowed him to mark and lift the ball when he reasonably believed it might be embedded. This time, the official ruling supported Reed. The suspicion stayed. That may be the central problem in the Patrick Reed file. An official ruling can resolve a hole. It cannot always repair a reputation. His defenders argue that Reed has often been treated differently because audiences already expect the worst. They point to rulings that cleared him. They note that other players have used similar procedures without creating the same reaction. That argument deserves to be heard. There is no public evidence proving that every disputed Reed ruling involved intentional wrongdoing. Some incidents ended with penalties. Others ended with officials saying he had followed the rules. But reputations are not built like legal judgments. They accumulate. One image remains beside another. The sand, the embedded ball, the interviews, the accusations from years earlier. Nothing proves the entire story by itself. Together, they make every new explanation more difficult to sell. In 2022, professional golf's power structure began to break apart. LIV Golf offered guaranteed contracts, enormous purses, team ownership narratives, and a reduced schedule. The PGA Tour controlled history, rankings, established tournaments, and the traditional route to prestige. Players were no longer choosing only where to compete. They were choosing which version of golf would control their commercial future. Reed joined LIV and resigned his PGA Tour membership. For a player who had often appeared to be fighting the establishment, the move looked almost predictable. But the decision was larger than personality. LIV needed recognizable champions. The PGA Tour needed departure to carry consequences. Every player became leverage. Reed brought LIV several useful assets: a Masters title, a Ryder Cup identity, a willingness to play globally, a reputation strong enough to create headlines even when he was not leading a tournament. He also brought competitive value. Across his LIV seasons, the recorded payouts continued accumulating individual earnings, team earnings, bonuses, more than $40 million according to the public calculation. The number did not prove LIV had purchased loyalty forever. It proved that loyalty now had a measurable price. Then Reed moved from defense to litigation. In 2022, lawsuits filed on his behalf accused golf media figures and organizations of defaming him and damaging his reputation. Reed sought hundreds of millions of dollars, with later actions reportedly totaling $1 billion. The defendants disputed his claims. A federal judge dismissed the lawsuits. In 2023, the cases were dismissed with prejudice. In 2024, Reed was ordered to pay defendants legal fees and costs. An appellate court later upheld the dismissals. The courts did not rule that every criticism ever directed at Reed was accurate. They ruled that his lawsuits had failed to establish actionable defamation under the required legal standards. That legal failure mattered beyond Reed. Professional golf had entered a period in which players, tours, journalists, and investors were no longer arguing only through interviews. They were using subpoenas, complaints, contract language, suspension, eligibility rules. The sport's moral debate had become a commercial dispute conducted through legal systems, and Reed stood near the center of it. In January 2023, the old pattern returned in Dubai. Reed's tee shot became lodged in a palm tree. He identified a ball by its markings and took a penalty drop after consulting officials. Broadcast footage led some viewers to believe the ball may have entered a different tree. The DP World Tour said 2 referees and several marshals had identified the tree, and officials accepted Reed's identification. Reed said he was 100% certain and later called the controversy a non-issue. Once again, the ruling and the public reaction moved in different directions. By then, the question was no longer whether Patrick Reed could explain an individual incident. The question was whether anyone was still listening to the explanation without first consulting the archive. That is what a damaged public image does. It changes the burden. Every ambiguous moment becomes a test. Every denial is compared with an older denial. Every camera angle becomes evidence in a trial that is not actually taking place. The industry benefits from this tension. Controversy drives coverage. Coverage preserves relevance. Relevance protects commercial value. But eventually, the same tension becomes dangerous. Because a sport that sells outrage for attention may later discover it cannot control what the audience refuses to forgive. Then came 2026. Reed won the Hero Dubai Desert Classic. Soon after, he won again at the Qatar Masters. By mid-July, the DP World Tour listed him first in the race to Dubai and 26th in the world ranking. The numbers said something the reputation could not erase. Patrick Reed was still good enough. That changed the return conversation. A struggling former champion asking for another opportunity can be ignored. A major winner leading a major international tour creates pressure. Performance is the strongest form of leverage in professional sport. Reed did not need the public to forget his history. He needed the scoreboard to make that history commercially inconvenient. The PGA Tour did not create a special amnesty program for him. Because Reed resigned before violating certain tour regulations, the tour said he could become eligible as a non-member after the 25th of August 2026. He could pursue membership for 2027 through the past champion category and potentially improve his status through the DP World Tour pathway. The route was procedural. The consequences were symbolic. Some will see the return as proof that the system works. Reed left. He served the applicable period away. He continued competing elsewhere. Now he is following the available rules back. From that perspective, denying him access would not protect integrity. It would replace regulation with personal punishment. His supporters would also point to the cost Reed has already paid. Years of hostile galleries, constant suspicion, legal defeat, family members exposed to public abuse, a reputation that may never fully recover. There is another side. The PGA Tour spent years presenting the LIV conflict as a battle over loyalty, tradition, and the future of professional golf. If successful players can collect tens of millions elsewhere and later return through existing categories, the deterrent begins to weaken. Other players will study the sequence, leave, collect guaranteed or elevated compensation, remain visible through majors and international tours. Wait, return when the market changes. That is not necessarily misconduct. It is strategy, and strategy is contagious. Patrick Reed's comeback therefore reaches far beyond Patrick Reed. It tests whether golf's institutions still control player movement. It tests whether fan trust matters as much as competitive data. It tests whether a tour can punish departure without permanently weakening its own fields. Most importantly, it tests whether performance eventually overrides every other concern. Because Reed's results create a problem no press release can solve. If he returns and wins, the PGA Tour benefits from the drama. Television audiences receive a familiar character. Sponsors receive attention. Tournaments receive a major champion with a long archive of conflict. The same reputation that makes his return uncomfortable also makes it valuable. The logo is never the entire story. The leverage was Patrick Reed may walk back onto a PGA Tour course carrying the same identity he carried away from it. Masters champion, Captain America, libre defector, legal combatant, rules controversy survivor, international winner. To some viewers, his return will look like redemption. To others, it will look like a system surrendering because the player remained too competitive to exclude. Neither interpretation can be proven by one tournament. The pattern will be measured slowly through sponsor invitations, broadcast treatment, crowd reactions, rules, decisions, And the first moment when a ball stops somewhere the camera cannot fully explain. $40,709,215. August 25, 2026. At the beginning, those looked like two numbers from different stories. Now they look connected. Maybe Patrick Reed is simply coming home. Or maybe golf is discovering that in a divided industry, home is no longer where loyalty lives. It is where the leverage is strongest. And if that is true, the return date was never the warning. The price was